Hi, it's Amanda. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day today. As always, if you're new or returning and you haven't yet already, please be sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you like the video, give it a big thumbs up and leave any comments, questions, or concerns you have down below. So I've mentioned this video before, and this is going to be a makeup related video between the Natasha Denona mini palettes and the bite-sized palettes from e.l.f. 5 of each that could be dupable. Some of these are pretty much not going to be very dupable, but some are almost identical. This is more to show that you don't have to purchase expensive makeup to get good quality. So I'm going to show you the ones that I do have, and then I'm going to pick one of the comparables to do today with one palette using on one eye and one in the Natasha Denona on the other. Here I'm going to show you all the ones that I do have, and then we'll pick one to use. Now the Natasha Denona mini palettes run for about $25. So this is the mini Lila palette from Natasha Denona. And the one that is comparable in the e.l.f. bite-sized shadows is this Carnival Candy. So they're not identical. There's definitely some differences, but you can see the similarities. I also have the mini gold palette by Natasha Denona. I also have the full-size palette. And on the e.l.f., it is called Hot Jalapeno. These are $3. So these e.l.f. ones are only $3, whereas the Natasha Denona ones are $25. And you can see like there is definitely a shade difference, but there is enough similarities that you could get a very similar look with some of these, if not identical. This is the Natasha Denona mini Nude palette, and this one is like almost identical in my opinion. This is the Cream and Sugar from e.l.f. The shades in these two, like this is almost an exact dupe. And this is the mini Star palette from Natasha, and this is Truffles by e.l.f. So there's definitely some very strong similarities. I have one more. And the last one is, this is the mini Sunset palette, which I do have the full size. You guys have probably seen that. And this is the Rose Water. Sorry if there's dog hair. I've talked about it in one of my lives recently. My husky is blowing out her winter coat. I'm probably going to be using the Cream and Sugar and then the mini Nude. These are the ones that are, this is the most dupable. And although the gold and the Hot Jalapeno, like when we put the shades up against each other, they don't look the same on camera. In real life, there's very little difference. The undertones are slightly off, but with good blending and stuff like that. Prime my eyes today with the Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow primer. I've talked about it before. I'm not a huge fan of this eye primer, but to give it a fair shot, I don't want to use concealer, and my Urban Decay one is like dead. I've used like all of it. And putting that on and blending it out. And then once I have this on, I'm going to zoom you guys in and we will get started. I have my eyeshadow primer down. I use the Anastasia, and I'm gonna take a little bit of translucent powder. This is not necessary. I just take hardly any just to be sure it's all set. If I had more patience to actually be sure to wait that the primer was dry, that would be beneficial, but I don't always wait that added time. So I'm just taking hardly anything on this brush and just making sure there's no tackiness on the primer. I'm gonna do the e.l.f. on this eye because this eye, I know on this eye I have a little patch here where it doesn't take pigment very well. So I am first dipping into the e.l.f. palette with this shade, and I'm tapping off the excess, and then I'm going to place it and blend it on in. And I know that this shade in particular is going to take a little bit of building out of this palette because it's very close to my skin tone. So I hope that that is coming off on camera. It is a very, very light shade. It literally is almost the color of my skin tone, so this shade is not going to be exact. So I ran that through my crease. I'm going to take a similar brush and dip into the Natasha Denona palette. We are going to dip into this shade, the lightest shade in here, which is, let me hold it up against each other. So you can see this shade in the e.l.f. palette is way more pink, and this one in the Natasha Denona is more of a sand or a tan color. So this is gonna pull more. I'm just gonna pick up a little bit, tap off the excess, place it, and then drag it on in and buff it out. You can already tell that there is definitely a color difference here. I'm gonna grab just a little bit more to make sure that these edges are blended well. So I think I'm going to stop the blending there. And you can tell, you can't really see much of a shade on this eye, but you can see it on this eye, and right here is where I get that skipping. That's not the eyeshadow, that is more me than anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into this Truffles palette, and I'm going to grab this shade. Just try and deepen this up a little bit so they are more comparable. Keep in mind, these e.l.f. palettes are only $3, so even if I purchased 2 e.l.f. palettes, it still doesn't even come anywhere near the Natasha Denona palette price, which is $25. So I am gonna dip in a couple of times to build up the opacity so we can get it as close as possible. So those are, it's getting closer. The e.l.f. is a little bit, it's taking a little bit longer. It's not as pigmented. The shadow itself is not as pigmented, but I'm not having any issues with it blending out or building up. It's not going patchy on me, building nicely. And the shade is, there's a little bit more fallout on this side. The shade is actually pretty comparable if you ask me. Like this one is a little bit more, you guys can see the difference. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna stick in the original palettes. I'm going to use the same brush, and I'm going to start with the e.l.f. first, and I'm going to dip into this darker shade just to deepen up the outer corner of my eye. So if you guys haven't seen me do this before, I just place the shadow on the outside of my eye, the outer third area. I pat it in. I pat it and swipe it in. Once I have the majority of the color deposited, I will swirl it to blend it and then like slightly drag it up. I don't go all the way in like I did with my original color. I just go about halfway in just to get some depth here, and I will utilize the space on my lid. I don't mind if my lid ends up dark because I will put a shimmer on over it. All right, once that color is placed, I'm going to go back into the brush I originally was using for the Natasha palette, and I'm going to dip into the darkest shade on this palette and do the same thing. Now again, these are, the Natasha Denona palettes are more pigmented. So this eye still has a little bit more definition, so I'm going to ever so slightly tap into the Natasha palette and really tap it off, because I know that these shadows, her darker shadows, are extremely pigmented, and I don't want to end up to where we can't make them comparable. So as I'm looking in the viewfinder, and the shades are, like, the undertones is different palettes. However, the overall look is very similar. So now we are just going to do the shimmer shade. Okay, so I'm going to scoot up just a little bit so you guys can see. Again, this is where my eye just doesn't take pigment. So they are very similar. The undertone is, I'm going to take it's awkward to do. I'm going to be taking this shade, and I might end up doing this shade just over the middle. And the same in this palette. The shimmer shades are so similar. And I am going to be using the same brush. I have a brush cleaner here to use in between each one to make sure that there is no cross contamination, if you will. We're going to start off with the e.l.f. palette. I don't typically use this brush all the time. I prefer to go in with my finger than I do prefer to go in with the brush. I feel like you get more shimmer out of it if you use your finger. I'm going to dip into the same copper shade on the Natasha Denona and stamp it on. Since I'm still in the Natasha Denona, I'm going to go ahead and grab that lighter champagne color and put that in the middle. I don't usually, I'm sure you guys can tell, I don't usually, I'm going to wipe it off here and go into the e.l.f. palette, the light palette, and do it on this side. I don't typically wear super dark shadow. I am just not super comfortable with it, to be honest. So that is both eyes, the Natasha Denona side and that's backwards, and the e.l.f. side. So I can tell you that I'm sure you guys can see there definitely is some differences, but overall they are very similar. If you didn't know I used two different palettes, you may be able to tell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up my makeup, and then I will be back to show you guys the final look. Alrighty guys, so here we are with the completed product. So what I am seeing, the primary difference is from afar, these look almost identical to me. It's very similar shade range. The only thing that I am noticing looking at them both is this eye seems a little bit more warm tone and this eye seems a little bit more cool tone. But all in all, the looks are very similar if you ask me. Again, this one's just a little bit more cool toned and this is a little bit more warm toned. But you can see the eye looks are very similar, and for the price difference, the blendability for them is a little bit different, but not enough for me to be willing to continue to go out and buy these $25 palettes over these $3 palettes. I mean, that to me, that's just crazy. If you like Natasha Denona because of the brand, that's one thing. And I'm not saying that this is a bad brand. I enjoy this brand. But when you have comparables out there that give you almost the exact same look, I mean, I can't even justify continuing to purchase these if these continue to come out. If you're interested in doing doing some of these other palettes that I showed at the beginning, let me know. Again, it's probably going to be very similar to where they pull a little bit different, but overall the look is about the same. I have completed my base, obviously. If you guys like the base or you want to know how I achieved this, I will be uploading a video of my favorite 2020 base products to get my base look. With all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I hope you are having a good day, evening, night, wherever you are, and I will see you next time.